Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whisky and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. Today we close out the month of anime with the acclaimed sci-fi film Akira. Please be advised, spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back, guys. So we are continuing the month of anime.
Oh my god, I just figured out why you picked May for anime month. Okay, sorry.
That joke's getting old, and we've only done it twice. So we are finishing up this month with the critically acclaimed film Akira, which probably a bunch of you have seen, much like the last film that we reviewed.
This is definitely a movie. I had lots of questions. I didn't do any research, so I wanted to be surprised what you had to say.
Yes.
But I will admit, at the beginning, I had trouble following at the beginning, so I did have to look at Wikipedia to just read the first paragraph. Okay, this is what happened. Okay. And then eventually it picked up and I was able to follow.
So there is a lot to talk about.
First thing, can you please pick a movie that does not have body parts and organs and flesh just all up in people's faces? I'm like, oh my god! At the end
we have done this show for over a year now. You should know what I'm going to pick. But also, it's fun.
All I know is I'm sitting down to watch an anime, and I'm thinking it's something cute, like Studio Ghibli, and I'm like, oh my god, what is this?
Oh,
I thought I was
not
watching...
all anime is Studio Ghibli, especially today. There's a dark side to anime. I'm not sure if you're aware.
Well, I thought the dark side was just like hentai.
I mean, hentai gets kind of like the end of this movie sometimes. But anyway, I'm not surprised you're confused.
I was watching The Thing.
So, both of you, before we get into the movie, I will say, like, we touched on this a little bit in our last podcast, but both of these films were very impactful for Western audiences getting really into anime. Mm-hmm. This one was a little less initially successul from what I saw. And I'm not surprised because the other film was very cute and cuddly. This one was pretty nightmarish, but...
No, but the other one wasn't successful at first either.
No. So this one has almost got kind of a Game of Thrones history to it. So Akira was
there's incest?
No, so Akira was a manga that was written in 1982, I believe. 1981 or 2. And it had been going on for the past couple of years, and so the director of this film is the same person who wrote and drew for the the manga. So same creator, and he made this movie before the manga series was completed. So these are supposed to be kind of like separate but equal entities telling a version of the same story.
A poorly timed choice of words, but okay.
Right? You know what I mean. The movie's different. It cuts out a lot of stuff from the manga, and it's supposed to be treated as its own thing, even though like it is. And some parts of the movie actually influenced how he decided to finish the story in the manga.
So much like we have the Marvel Cinematic and TV universes are separate. It's kind of the same thing.
And also like Game of Thrones, this film came out before the manga was finished.
That's interesting, okay.
But again, unlike Game of Thrones, the person who was writing the manga was directing the movie. I just thought
George R.R. Martin just had major writer's block all the time.
It'd be like if...
It's a thing.
Exactly. So it'd be like if George R.R. Martin directed every episode of Game of Thrones. Or like made a Game of Thrones movie before the book came out. That's kind of what it is. So, and the manga for Akira, it's epic. It's over 2,000 pages.
Wow.
Same story. You've got, dystopic Neo-Tokyo with like psychic people running around, but unlike the film, Akira actually makes an appearance and he's kind of like the main villain. Tetsuo ends up being sort of like his henchman. There's a really crazy part in the manga where their little like gang of raiders is held up in the sports stadium and Tetsuo's doing like psychic stuff to like scare off the other gangs, and he like looks back at Akira and goes, "The Moon Lord," and then Akira says, "The moon," and so Tetsuo like teleports up and makes a crater in the moon, which like causes a tidal wave to
my god.
So the manga is essentially the same story. Biker thug gets psychic powers and chaos ensues. But unlike the movie and the manga, a bunch of other people also get psychic powers, and they become kind of like different lords in the city of Neo-Tokyo doing like psychic battle against each other, and Akira is kind of the main bad guy.
So it's kind of like that show Heroes.
Or even again, it makes sense Game of Thrones wise, where it's like the different kingdoms and stuff like that. So that's kind of where the manga goes. But they all go to the same place where Tetsuo and Akira are defeated. The city is kind of, swallowed up by a big thing of energy, and the heroes are left. Yeah, and the heroes are left over to.
Why does anybody still live in this town? Like,
right?
It happens twice now. Like a move.
Yeah, right. It's
So at first when I was watching this, film, they have very briefly at the beginning. We find out later what was another energy ball. I thought it was like a nuclear bomb or something.
That is what you're supposed to think, because that's what they told everyone. No one knows about Akira except the government. They're like, oh, we got nuked again. But no, it was. But
I was watching it and I was like, the place bounced back pretty well. They have skyscrapers in TV. Did we really need to have that first thing to begin with? And then when you find the whole story, you're like, oh, okay, I understand it now.
Well, it's funny. Our last review, My Neighbor Totoro, was kind of all about it's fine. It's all about nature. This one's all about another thing that's kind of very connected with Japanese culture, and that's like their relationship with technology and how that's kind of affected them in the past. Since we last did a show, I actually watched the original Godzilla, because I had never seen it before. But that's the interesting thing, if you haven't seen it, is the film is actually about the ethics of weapons of mass destruction and creating and using them. And that's sort of the same thing here, because it sort of suggested that they were creating these psychic children as weapons. Yeah, possibly for World War III, and it just backfired. And it's sort of the same thing in Godzilla, which is considered one of Japan's greatest films.
What I love this just speaks to how they were portraying human nature, and I love this. But it was especially you speak about it, they went through all this effort to create essentially psychic children to fight World War III. No one was like, oh, let's just not have a world. Let's plan to just not have one. I love the effort that humanity will put into that, but not preventing it from happening.
Right, and the fact they keep going. But it's the same thing in Godzilla. Essentially, if you haven't seen it, the idea is that nuclear testing woke up a dinosaur, and they don't really ever get into it in the movie whether the dinosaur had nuclear breath before or if the nuclear testing gave him superpowers or something. But essentially it was from our carelessness with nukes, it created a monster that couldn't be stopped by nukes, and then so a scientist creates a new weapon that can kill Godzilla.
The anti-nuke.
Well, so it destroys oxygen.
Oh.
And so he's like, I have something that can kill Godzilla, but I'm afraid that it will be used to kill people after. Yeah. And so that is what Godzilla is really about. And so that's considered one of Japan's greatest films, and that is kind of a part of their cultural consciousness that I think got carried into other things, including Akira, is this idea of when science goes too far and whether it's ethical to create all-powerful things like these psychic children that have in the movie they call it godlike power. But yeah, so this film is not a good feeling kind of movie.
Not yet rated.
It's R-rated, very deservedly so. It's very disturbing. It's not. I knew going into it might not be your cup of tea.
Well, what's funny? I was watching it. And I was like, this isn't really my jam, but I was like, oh my god, finally I found a movie I can watch with my dad. And then there was that, because my dad loves sci-fi and apocalypse and all this other
Has your dad seen Akira before?
Probably not. And I was like, I'm going to introduce this to you, you're going to love it, we can watch this together. And then the scene comes up where they assault the girl, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't want to watch this anymore. Never mind. It would have been fine if they didn't rip her shirt off. I'm like, that was more disturbing than when they hit her in the face.
Yeah, it's and that character is very different in the manga. Let's just say.
Now, I wasn't. Maybe I missed things, but I wasn't clear. Is that his sister or
girlfriend?
Girlfriend. Okay.
It's all the bikers have the girls hanging off them, and when they all return from their night out, all of them are paired up except her, and she's like, "Where's Tetsuo?" So it's
okay. So couple things that sort of bugged me about this movie, and again, I enjoyed this movie, but a couple things that bugged me. One, the name Canada.
So it's not spelled the same.
It's not spelled the same. It's pronounced parts differently. But every time they would yell, I'm like, y'all realize that's a country, right?
Maybe I'll make this as like a meme to like to advertise that we're doing anime month. But one thing I found kind of funny rewatching this is no matter if you're watching subs or dubs, for this film in particular, it doesn't matter because the characters are just screaming each other's names for half the dialogue. Kaneda!
Well, you know what's funny is when I've watched like especially like younger when I was younger and I watched just different shows, and they would do like they'd have an episode where they would parody different types of animation. Anytime they would parody anime, it's literally just that people screaming the other character's names.
Oh,
for like
Dragon Ball Z is the other one where it's like, oh, it's like you don't even need. You could watch it in Japanese and still make the same
still
amount
understand
of
what's going on. The other thing that kind of bugged me about, well, besides the graphic flesh and tissue weird thing at the end, which thanks for not telling me about that.
Of course. Leads to a more organic reaction for you on the show.
The motorcycle part, or their bikes or whatever they are, to me that was it seemed like it was something that was really important to the characters, but they never really go much into it, so it always kind of just seemed like a side thing, and like I forget about it.
You mean the fact that they have motorcycles?
No, but they have. But like at the end, he's like trying to like essentially boss fight this thing, and he brings his motorcycle in, and I was just like, why? It's like I get at the beginning you were in a motorcycle, I got it, but it's like clearly there's some other connection here that wasn't properly communicated to me with, and now it's like, okay, so we just need to know this was made in the 80s, so we need to bring the motorcycles in.
Maybe it's obviously
they reminded me a lot of Tron.
Yeah, well,
their design.
So a lot of things. I guess we'll get into this now that you bring that up, because like one thing, and this is actually. It's relevant to Studio Ghibli as well, but like the 80s were like it's considered the quote-unquote golden age of anime. Anime had existed post World War II from like the 60s, maybe the late 50s, but it was always really cheap. Like another show that I saw as a little kid was like Astro Boy, and that is like, if you've seen that, that's like what anime was kind of thought of as like these cheap like silly cartoons from Japan and stuff, but when the 1980s came by, there was a huge economic boom in Japan, and so that led to a lot more productions being made. For instance, in the 70s there were only 45 anime feature films made in the whole of the 1970s. 45 films.
Wow. In
the 1980s, 220 films.
Whoa, okay, that's a boom.
So that's why it's considered the golden age of anime, not just from like series, but also films. And that also meant that the production budget was increased. This was the most expensive anime feature film made at the time.
I can kind of see that.
And you do see a lot of very sophisticated animation styles. When you see the city, they have the layered animations that Disney pioneered with like Snow White, where the cartoons can like weave in and out between like backgrounds and foregrounds and stuff. During the scene where the clowns have like captured Tetsuo and his girlfriend, there's a cool bit where there's like fire hanging down and there's a focus pull in a cartoon. It unfocuses on the fire and focuses on the bike.
Yeah,
and
I think I remember that.
That's really crazy that they're able to do that. Also, there's that cool like streak that you see on their taillights when they're driving their motorcycles. It almost looks like Tron, where it leaves like a trail.
Yeah, it's like that's also like I got kind of Tron vibes.
And some of the animation was incredibly like. The frame count is where like the smoothness of the motion comes, and some of it was actually higher frame counts than Miyazaki movies. It went anywhere from 12 frames a second to 25 frames a second. So and
one of the things that I remember, and there's just the detail that was put into a lot of this film is incredible. One of my favorite scenes, and you'll be like, Billy, this is your favorite scene. My favorite scene is when I think it's when they're trying to break into the hospital, and we see the hospital from like, I think it's we zoom out from like the hospital, the building, and we just see And at first I'm like, are we looking at a bookshelf? I'm like, no, this is a building. And I love how they went through, and even though they weren't super detailed, they took the effort in to put different colors, different places, so you knew this was like a sky. And I thought that was really cool.
Oh yeah, and that might have even been some of the layered animation I was talking about too. Mm-hmm. Like most of the times when you see a cityscape, it's not just one drawing. It's like 20 drawings layered on top of each other, so each building is actually like a different layer of the picture itself. It's wild. Like there's lots of like making of Akira things out there, but let's see.
This is a movie
there's also camera motion in the animation, so it's not just like the same way you would see in like a live action film, like a dolly or a pan or a tilt or a zoom. There's like camera motion in the actual anime.
And I think I noticed that a lot towards the I think it's like the last like 40 minutes of the movies when they have the big face-off happening.
Yes. And
I did notice that a lot. And, it's weird when you watch an animated film and you think about, there's camera movement in anime. There really isn't a lot in animated films. And so when it does happen, it definitely does grab your attention, and it does give it a sense of realism. Like, specifically I'm thinking of when they had the news broadcast, and like, is this Akira comeback? And they're coming back or something. And, it just really gave you a sense that you were watching a real like telecast.
Oh yeah,
the fact that they wouldn't put those movies, so that was quite impressive, and it did have an effect on the actual film.
Oh yeah, so this, similar to My Neighbor Totoro, was very impactful, opened up a lot of people to anime. Mm-hmm. Eventually it became about as successful as this was another one where initially, like, according to IMDb, it didn't make a lot of money, but then I had conflicting accounts that it made about 45 million grossing. It was a lot. I think it was 30 million. No, I think it was actually more than that. I think my confusion came from the fact that it was listed in yen on IMDb, and so I was like having to do the math, and I think that was actually like only 10 million or something, but then that doesn't make sense because according to My Neighbor Totoro, that was $30 million. So then I was like, well, wait a second, wasn't this the most expensive anime? For some reason, it's hard. I'm getting like differing information on both of these, but I know that Akira was at least successful enough to get a VHS release in 1991. Mm-hmm. And this one was infamous because it was a dub that wasn't very good. Luckily,
the early dubs.
So I have the year 2000 DVD release, which has a superior dub from what I've heard. So I've actually never seen the 91 dub. I also didn't grow up on this movie because my parents didn't let me watch horrifying, monstrous stuff like this.
No, you just subject me to that.
Yeah.
I think I saw the same one. Whatever one was available for free on Hulu is the one I saw.
Ooh, I hope it's the 2000 one, because if it's the 91 one, I hear that it's like borderline incoherent with the translation and stuff like that.
Okay, no, I understood what's going on. I just had... It was interesting. This is a movie that you really have to walk into and take very seriously from the get-go, because that's kind of like what my problem was. And I guess this is wrong to think this way, but I'm like, it's an animated film. There's a certain level of passivity that you can expect in there, and you can't do that with this. You need to be aware. I had to watch the beginning, like maybe the first 20 minutes, like maybe 3 or 4 times to really even understand, and then I had to go and look it up on Wikipedia and read the paragraph of the first 20 minutes just to understand what was happening.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing.
There's a lot of detail in this, and there's a lot of interwoven storylines, and it does all come together. But it's something you have. It's something you could ever passively watch.
And that's the thing with that's another kind of cultural barrier we have here in the West, is like, we still, even though animation has come a long way, we still see it as like a children's medium,
which you should. It can be.
It can be, but that's the big thing in Japan, is it's anything. I mean, this movie is, again, like, if you are sensitive to gore or like anything very upsetting, I couldn't really recommend this.
The gore to me wasn't that bad.
Yes.
I mean, to me, a lot of the gore, it was very reminiscent of like Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yes.
When you would fall and then you just get the spattering of blood when somebody would be killed or something. The only thing that was it's just at the end.
Well, the mass destruction I figured might bother you with all the people just... Because I know, like, sometimes watching films and stuff, like, when it's...
I did feel for those people, but at the same time, it's kind of just, like... Because, after the first time it happens, I'm like, oh my god, those poor people. And then it happens again. I'm like, people, stop watching this. Move away.
Right? Yeah, they're all following him.
If there's a godlike creature on a bridge that's causing mass destruction, maybe don't follow him. So
Yeah.
At some point I was able to kind of dissociate a little bit and just be like, okay, these people are just being dumb. At
Right.
this point, I can't. I like when it first started, and and there was, I'm like, oh my god, those people I was sad about. But then later it was just like, you guys are just. Have you guys not read the Pied Piper like at all?
Right. So on top of all of that, this has been probably the most influential anime for anime artists. Most people who are currently working in the industry cite this as an inspiration. So people who are working on things like Attack on Titan and all of these other things.
My limited research, when I was trying to find where to watch the film, I did come across it is credited as one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time. Not even just anime, sci-fi in general.
It's really good. I like even rewatching it. I own the first volume of the manga somewhere at my parents' house. I bought it when I was like at a bookstore, and I really liked the movie, and I'm like, ooh, I should read this. Never finished it. There's 5 other volumes I'd have to read through, but every time I see this, I'm like, oh, I should read this, because it's the same story, but it's a lot more like in depth. You get all the crazy psychic characters, and like there are a lot of characters in the film that are only on screen for like 10 seconds that have like major story arcs in the manga. So it's like one of those things that every time I watch this, I'm like, oh, I should dig that up and read it again. But so yeah, this is probably the most influential anime film, at least for like anime artists. Also, people like the Wachowski sisters have been wanting to make an Akira live action film. It was a big influence on The Matrix. The film Chronicle was it was a huge influence on that, and apparently I heard that the Chronicle film was supposed to be an Akira live action movie, and then they like just decided to, like, for budgetary reasons, make it like a found, because that movie, I don't know if you've seen Chronicle, but it's kind of is Akira, because it's like these teenagers get psychic abilities from an alien ship, and then they start messing around with it. And
that was me last Tuesday, to be fair.
But yeah, so like in Chronicle, one of them is like bullied a lot, and so he ends up like using his powers to like kill people and stuff, and then it becomes a showdown with the rest of them trying to stop him. But it's done as like a found footage movie. It was interesting. It came out in like 2010 or 2011. And it did really well. It's what got the director to do the Fantastic Four movie that did not do so well. Yeah. But you could tell it was kind of a modern take, or like an American take on Akira, because it was the same story. Here are these people who get these powers, and one of them ends up, abusing them, and
the only thing, and so I was talking earlier about there's lots of intricate storylines, and so that's one of the reasons why you can tell that the basically animation should not be the message of the movie. The animation is just the medium they chose, and that's. And I always respect people who do animation, because animation is one of the few, if not the only, film forms that you can totally create exactly what you want, because you can literally draw anything you want,
and you don't even need to spend money on crazy special effects.
Just on some Crayola.
Exactly. Got to pay those animators fairly, and that'll cost you a bit, but otherwise, you can make anything happen. The only thing that
didn't work for me was there was one storyline. What was it with about the whole government coup? Yeah, to me. I mean, I understood where they're going from the beginning, but then they had them all show up again later, and then it kind of crossed a little bit into like tinfoil hat area, and then it's never like, to me it wasn't ever fully explained. So I'm like, that if I were to like strengthen the film, I would just remove that storyline.
I agree. There's a couple of things with this film that make it. So this is actually my favorite anime film of all time. I have I love Miyazaki films and stuff, but if I were to like pick one that I like more than anything else,
you don't seem like
it's this one. However, this film is really flawed, and I think it partly has to do with the fact that the director was trying to condense 2,000 pages of a manga into a 2-hour movie.
Anytime you have that much material and you have to condense it,
I feel like if people knew how successful it was going to be, maybe it as a trilogy would have been a way better idea. But like, that's the thing, the government coup is like a whole storyline in the manga that's like its own thing. There's the whole romance, quote unquote, between Kaneda and Kei is like actually a romance in the manga, and it's not just
I forgot that was even a thing on there.
Exactly, because it just kind of gets dropped.
It kind of just shows up, and then it's just like, and then it kind of is, you forget about it, and then all of a sudden Kaneda would make some off remark about, oh, so you want to do something later, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, that's right, I forgot he's in
well,
there.
and also he's like so scummy about how he's hitting on her at first. It's like it's
he first meets her, she's like, no thanks, bye. He's like, you cold bitch.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy at first.
Hashtag nice guy.
Hashtag nice guy.
We're gonna have to put him in the same category as Ross,
right? But yeah, so like that's kind of one of the biggest problems with the movie. It gets really messy around the third act.
Not really I guess it's not really the fault of the movie. It's kind of just more like you said. It's just there was so much source material to pull from, and I kind of feel like maybe they did that to hopefully set up for a potential maybe sequel or something, or prequel or something, and then it would have made more sense. But unfortunately, with it not, I guess, being received well. I mean, it was received well.
Eventually, it's like
it took a while to find its audience.
It's kind of the same thing with My Neighbor Totoro. Like now, both of them are considered like classics.
Yeah.
But because it was hard for a global release and stuff like that, it faced a lot of hurdles. Much like My Neighbor Totoro, this one was also by Roger Ebert and other people like hailed as like a masterpiece. Which led to it getting the VHS thing in plays on like TV and stuff, I'm sure. But it was a long way to go, and I feel like the director knew, especially with how much they were spending on the film, because again, it was the most expensive anime at the time to be produced. That unless it just did gangbusters at the box office, that it probably wasn't going to get a sequel. So I guess he was just trying to condense as much as he could into the movie, and to some extent, I think that hurt kind of the cohesion.
Because the part that didn't make sense to me was just, so I understood the meaning. They're trying to figure out what to do. Okay, I got that. That was easy to follow, and then the coup part. Okay, it seemed a little excessive, but I kind of again understood where they were coming from. At least as far as that colonel or general character is concerned, I kind of understood why he did it. Thought it was a little extreme, so I guess that would have been explained more. But the part that makes it is later we then revisit, I guess, one of the people who was on the board.
Yeah.
And that he's like putting certificates in a suitcase. And then we pan over to his bathroom and there's dead bodies in there, and I'm like, who are these people?
So I've seen this movie like
so I don't know if you could
tens and tens of times. Yeah, so it's very easy to miss. I totally missed that the first few times I watched this as a teenager. So what that is the freedom fighter group that are trying to like liberate the psychic kids.
Yeah.
It's like the general says, I think there's a mole. And
oh my god!
So he, and as you see, he's talking to one of the freedom fighters. So he's the mole. So because the coup is happening and the all of the people on the border are getting arrested, he's like, oh no, they're gonna find out I'm the one who is leaking information. So we got to shred all the documents and all that. So that's what that is.
What's
but
the deal
it's
with
very
the people
easy
in the
to
bathtub?
Miss. Oh,
what? Well, yeah, but who are they?
People were probably gonna get like arrested, like AIDS or something.
And then so he leaves, and he's followed by this guy I thought was dead.
Yeah.
And then he just like gives up the will to live. I'm so confused as to what that was.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, is he foaming at the mouth because he's taken too many pills, or is it because he's having like a heart attack? I don't know. I'm with you. That whole section when I was younger, I just was like, what the hell's even going on with any of this? But to explain it, he was the mole, so he's like, oh no, we've been had. I'm going to probably end up like executed or something, so I need to get out of here. And
with my stock certificates.
Yeah, exactly.
My stock options.
And then even like, it also kind of shows that he didn't necessarily have the best intentions, even though they were trying to free the kids, because he was just, Ryu, the guy who was like the leader of their little like freedom fighter group, he's just oh, get away from me, you can't be seen with me, so yeah, things, I think it's more just like kind of the chaos of everything going on. Again, like in the manga, it becomes like almost like Mad Max, like the city is just completely just overrun by like gangs where like they're led by some psychic person and they're all like fighting each other, and there's a big showdown at the end. And actually that's kind of a cooler thing at the end of the manga is like Kaneda gets like a whole bunch of like motorcyclists to essentially go to like war with Akira and Tetsuo. Like, so there's like an army of bikes like coming towards the stadium, like
See, and I would have liked that because I feel like that would have kind of played up the bike thing more. Because to me, I guess, and I'm not trying to be overly critical, but it's just like I understood at the beginning their bike gang, but then at the end, it's like literally with everything going on, we feel the need to bring his bike in to the final fight, and it's not even convenient.
It's very like silly. It reminds me though of like, because there's like always a history of like movies with really cool like vehicles and stuff. Like in Star Wars, you got the Millennium Falcon. You've got like the time machine in Back to the Future, the DeLorean and stuff. And his motorcycle had that same vibe to me. Like, and I showed this to a friend of mine years and years ago who actually rides motorcycles. And I was like, oh man, he's got such a cool bike. And he's like, oh, it's like a real bike, right? Like, this is a thing that exists.
This exists.
Like, everything they're describing it as is something you could get, and it could look like that. But I don't know. I think it matches like Kaneda's character so well, and it is kind of goofy that he's going in there with like a laser beam, riding a motorcycle, like just like make it. Tetsuo's like a big horrible monster, and he's like, "Oh, you're such a crybaby." He's such a like lovable jerk, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Because Kaneda's not a good person, but for some weird reason, he's like likable, even though he's like a biker thug. Like, there's just something very funny about him being like defiant to like
this movie though really did watching this finally did explain to me why people were running around at Comic-Cons with pills in the back of their shirts.
Oh, I guess you saw some Kaneda cosplays,
I was just like, do these people have drug problems? Like what is this? And I figured it was a character. I should know what it was. But that kind of explains that for me.
Oh yeah, now you'll. I don't know. You could just scream.
Actually, I kind of thought his jacket was kind of cool. It was very Michael Jackson.
The way Tetsuo looks at the end of the film with his cape and stuff reminded me of something out of like Dragon Ball Z. His hair is like sticking up.
Right. Okay. That was like a whole. I love that. I love that it was a whole like level of campiness that was just added to this, and I loved it. I'm like, he's like, yeah, I'm unstable. Let me show you. Grabs cape, puts cape on. Am I stable now?
Look at me, I've got a cape now. What are you gonna do?
His maniacal laugh was just. It was so many moods. I loved it because on one end I'm like, this is like ridiculous, and the other end I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of epic at the same time. I
gotta say, this is another one where I grew up with I didn't grow up. Like I saw this when I was like a teenager. But
he was 3 watching this. Be disturbed.
Oh yes. No, I was like a teenager, but like when I saw this, I've always seen the dub. I'm kind of curious to see the sub because the dub's. I don't know, I'm sure some anime fan's gonna hate me for saying this, but I think it was pretty well cast. Like, all of the voices, there's one that doesn't match, but it also kind of doesn't matter because his character's barely in the movie. If you remember that one person with almost like an afro sort of hairstyle with glasses, like, oh, we're praying for the return of Akira, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
So that's a woman in the manga, and she's one of the psychic people that, like... she's actually sort of the
but she doesn't make it past the bridge
in the movie. in the manga, she's like a huge character. She's like she's basically sort of the Yoda to how Kay gets like psychic abilities in the movie. Mm-hmm. So she becomes one of the like leaders of a group of people, and she's being like taught by that woman, and that woman is sort of like the anti-Akira. Like, she's like the good character in the manga, but the fact that they cast a man to voice that, it's like, oh, I guess they didn't realize it was a woman. But other than stuff like that, I felt like it was pretty well cast.
Yeah, it was pretty well cast. Yeah,
all of the voices matched the character. Tetsuo had kind of a whiny side to his voice. Kaneda sounded like a street punk.
That's what made it so hard to take him seriously.
Oh yeah,
he reminds me a lot of Ross from Friends. He's kind of just like, oh, can't anything in my life go right?
I mean, that was always the thing that I thought was really cool about the story, even when I first saw this, is like, it's a pretty simple premise. It's like, what if you gave superpowers to the worst person possible?
Right.
And that's something that has been done since then. I mentioned Chronicle, but even like a year or two ago, there was that movie about like an evil Superman that was like a horror movie. I don't know if you remember that. It was like I wish I could remember what it was called, but yeah, like this idea of like they're someone getting superpowers that doesn't deserve them, and becoming kind of like a almost
and also
natural disaster.
I love his reasons for being a bad person. They're so petty.
It's like you bullied me. Also, that was kind of
you
funny.
protected me as a child, and I'm done with it.
Well, no, that's actually the funny thing. Is he says like, you were always so mean to me, and then when we see the flashbacks at the very end of the movie, it's like, you know, he beat up some bullies who took his toy, and it's like, oh wow, Tetsuo. You really
so evil.
Yeah, he was so mean to you for being the only person to be
basically
nice to you.
File a claim. Go see a therapist. I don't know how you lived through that.
Right, and that too. Like, it's
who's gonna play you in the movie.
Well, and that's the other thing too. So they have been in Japan. They have been trying to make a live action version of this movie for a number of years. The first time I heard about it really gaining steam was like in 2007, but it's just been in development hell. There's even like, if you go to IMDb and look it up, there's even like pictures.
I think I would be less interested in a live action version, more interested in just seeing a continuation of the story.
Well, what I would want if they're going to make a live action version is do not make a direct adaptation of this film. Make a 3-part trilogy and try and do the whole series. Like, don't do it based on this film, do it based on the manga, because there's so much more like interesting stuff that the movie didn't have time to touch on, and the manga wasn't even finished by the time the movie came out. So it's kind of, I feel this way about remakes or reboots or anything, but I do feel like they need to justify their existence a little bit. And if you're just going to remake, we get this all the time with like Disney live action remakes. What is the point of remaking it?
Do we really need to see Mufasa die in high definition?
Well, and if you're going to do it, have like an interesting take on it, you know? Like, even, I don't think it's that great of a movie, but like Maleficent, for instance, is at least a new twist on it.
Yeah, it's giving us more details about this character,
or a new perspective or something.
Right.
So if they are going to make a live action Akira, what I would want is the full story and not just a condensed 2-hour version. So make 3 movies or however many movies they think they would need to make, and tell like the whole story from the manga, because then you could go into territory that wasn't touched on in the original film. And I believe the creator, director, like, you know, the mind behind Akira, I do believe he's still around, so you could, you know, have him be like a producer on it or something.
Well, you know what I think? First off, I had a question. I know this is totally randomly out of nowhere. My brain's everywhere right now. Sorry. But at the beginning, when they don't break out. When he finagles getting that girl out of custody with him, they're leaving and there's an explosion in the background. I'm like, okay, was that grenade like delayed?
I think that was supposed to be the implication. It was supposed to be kind of like a dark punchline there, like, it did eventually go off, just way late or something like that.
Well, the worst part is even the freedom fighter had to get the snot kicked out of him.
Yeah.
And then still die. It's like, come on.
It's a pretty, part of the reason I wasn't expecting you to necessarily resonate with this story is that it is pretty miserable. There's not really a good guy, and like even the freedom fighters are pretty violent. Like everything is bad. Like there isn't really like a happy, like the military's super controlling, the freedom fighters are a little extreme, you know, there's suicide bombing places and stuff. And then all the people in there are just stupid. Yeah. I'm talking about not the characters, the citizens. Well, there is, that always bothered me, like, where, you know, at the beginning there's that motorcycle chase and everything, and you see all these people eating at, like, a fancy restaurant, and someone gets thrown through the window, and I'm guessing that's supposed to be, like, class disparity, like, this is the nice part of town where all that doesn't exist or whatever. But it did really raise a lot of questions, because the city seems to just be in a constant state of rioting. Like, no matter where you go, some freedom group is going to be like trying to like blow something up. So I guess maybe that's just supposed to really kind of play up the dystopian part of it. Yeah. Because if you look at, because normally like in live actions you get dystopian from like the set design, the lack of resources, and I think in this case they couldn't really do that. I think it's more like social malaise, kind of like people are the problem. I think, at least in this dystopia, like, and it would be understandable when they keep getting blown up every few years. I hate to admit it, this, like, parts of the movie even kind of made me think of this past year, just how chaotic everything's been.
I actually think I was going to bring that up and
Yeah.
be like, is this supposed to be, like, just now? I will admit, I watched part of it.
How ironic is it that it's 2019 in the movie, too?
I know, I saw that, too, and I was like, oh, so they were only off by, like, about a year.
Oh, yeah. I, like, laughed in, like, a sad way when that came up, because I forgot what year it was supposed to be in the movie, and then when I saw that, I was like, oh, God, they were only a year off.
Question. In the movie that takes place, and I think they said, Neo Tokyo, so when they rebuild again, is it Neo Tokyo?
Well, like, in the manga, they don't rebuild it. It's, like, very, like, it's almost like all the gangs exist in, like, a crumbling city. Like, it's after like, the whole incident with Tetsuo and awakening Akira and things get blown up and stuff. It's,
Do you know
like...
how mad I would be to live my life and be taken out by somebody like Tetsuo? That would be, that's like getting tackled on the 1 yard line. That's just sad.
Oh,
I'm like, great, I lived my whole life, and then, stable Mabel here, has a hissy fit, and we all have to die.
You do have a good point, though. Quite frankly, like, if I were in that, it does beg the question, like, what is keeping them there? Even if, like, you get...
Because from my understanding,
move
it's
to
just
northern Japan where it's quiet.
I know,
like,
because from my understanding, it's just this city. Like, that was my understanding. It's not, like, the world or anything like that.
I would imagine...
The closest it gets to being in the world is when they go into space, but that's pretty much it.
And that does... It's honestly, it really is, like, a fascinating world that the guy created, and I don't think even in the manga, like, they ever go outside of Tokyo, so it is interesting. It does make you wonder, like...
Oh my God!
How is America?
It's like that
is
Stephen
it
King novel Under the Dome? They can't leave.
They can't leave.
That's the problem.
Oh man, but yeah, it does make you wonder how bad the rest of the world is. If is Tokyo just like the worst place to live, or is it like, does America have?
What if it's just
problems?
what if Tokyo is just like the bad side of town for the world?
Well, and it's also like one thing that's kind of an interesting point in both the manga and the movie is they sort of suggest that these psychic abilities are the next stage of human development, and that also makes you wonder, like, is Neo Tokyo on the forefront of developing this, or are they the last to develop it? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's part of what the guy was trying to do, is like not really bring up the rest of the world. This is like a Japanese story, so let's keep it in Tokyo. But it does make you wonder, like, what the rest of the world is like. Is it as nightmarish as Neo Tokyo, or is Neo Tokyo just a product of getting blown up
and
all the time?
Tetsuo stays in Tokyo because he knows if he leaves its borders, he can get his butt kicked by the other psychic kids in other countries.
Who knows? And that was like kind of a point in the movie. I don't think it really happens too much in the manga, but again, I haven't read all of the manga, just like the first half of the first volume. But that was something in the movie. Tetsuo's like, let's run away, like, with his girlfriend, like, let's get out of this city.
Right, I'm like,
smartest thing he ever did. The whole movie.
I'm like, dude, just got out of a hospital. He can't see out of one eye, but yes, let's ride a motorcycle.
Let's steal my best friend's motorcycle, who has done nothing but be nice to me, because I'm jealous of his motorcycle.
They keep bringing up and like that. Okay, I'm sorry. I just thought that was funny. He like has all these powers, and he can get anything he wants. And what he wants his friend's motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like I appreciated the pettiness of that.
Yeah, and that too, especially after he like fully breaks out and he goes to that bar to get like drugs to control his headache. Like, that's the first thing he asks his biker friends. It's like, hey, where's Kaneda's bike? And it's like, really, dude, you can fly and you still care like where his bike is?
I think my favorite character though was he was part of the capsules. He was the guy that had like the bow tie thing going on.
Oh yes, his character
he was my
design.
favorite. He's like in it at the beginning, and then he just shows up again at the end.
Yeah,
but it's like he was my favorite character.
I like his character design, and that's the thing too. Like, I'm sure in the manga he probably has a lot more stuff going on that we don't see. All we know is that he's part of the gang. He's got a girlfriend that we see like talking on the phone at one point. She seems kind of like vapid, but and then he witnesses another biker die, and then he's like,
I will say this movie felt very 80s to me.
oh yeah, Yeah. Especially, again, like, there's lots of, like, neon, and a lot of it is, like, really cool,
and
but...
then we just have the unnecessary breast reveal. Like, that's a very 80s thing to do.
Oh, yeah. Also, just, again, like, it feels very, like...
It's very
Mad Max. Well, it reminds me a lot of stuff that was popular at the time, like... Mad Max, like, around the same time that the manga started being written was around the time The Thing came out, so maybe the artist saw the movie and was like, ooh, I want that in my...
That's what the transformation looks like right there, because that's immediately the first thing I thought of was, oh, it's The Thing.
And the timing...
animated.
The timing lines up a little bit, at least as far as when the manga was created. When this film came out, it was like almost a decade after The Thing had come out, so not quite, but So, despite maybe it not being something you'd want to rewatch too soon,
I still think it's something that people should. It's something you should definitely watch. I do think that we should tell people it can be kind of gross.
Oh yeah, it can be very gross. It's rated R, so if you...
I'm not going to be whiskey. I'm going to tell you it's kind of gross.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell from the rating on the back that it's probably not for all audiences, but if you like kind of dark sci-fi, it's right up your alley. Again, I guarantee you will recognize something from a movie or an anime you like, because this is inspired many people.
I know you talked about Chronicles. This is basically animated Terminator.
Yes. Yes, it is. That is exactly. It's very 80s. It's very violent. But if neither of those things...
And then we have the unstoppable thing like we had in Terminator, except for very different reasons.
Yeah, honestly, both of the films that we reviewed this month, I would say are good starter films for people if they've never gotten into anime, but for different reasons. If you want something more wholesome and happy, go with My Neighbor Totoro. If you're someone who likes kind of more... R-rated, gritty, violent, somewhat introspective, maybe philosophical, like...
Hashtag nice guys.
whiny street thugs getting superpowers and going completely insane.
That's how I'm going to describe this movie. I'm going to be like, it's about gangs that fight violently in the street, and every so often stop to be petty about it.
Pretty much. But yeah, like very different genre, but I would say like both films are like if you're starting off like and you haven't seen an anime before somehow, both of these films are good starting point.
And this is and I know I'm maybe more critical of it, but Akira, it's a very good movie. Like I said, I was excited to show this to my dad. Now I won't watch it with him, but I'm like, here, you watch it. I think he would appreciate this. It's a very good sci-fi story, and especially seeing the work that was accomplished in the animation they used for the time period, it's also quite impressive.
I also almost forgot before we completely wrap up. The music is one of my favorite things. I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about it.
Oh my god, okay, the music. Okay, I remember the music. There were parts that I was just like, this is so random. Why is this strange, the soundtrack? Right?
Well, so a lot of it, I'm sure you noticed, was very percussive, and there's chanting, but there was also a synth element to it. So it, in the same way...
The chanting is what thrown me off.
So... The story is kind of about, again, like, supposedly these psychic abilities are something everyone has the ability to do, and it's like the next stage of human development. Mm-hmm. So supposedly it's like a natural thing, but we've been able to awaken them unnaturally through like scientific experimentation. Mm-hmm. So one thing you get a lot is very traditional Japanese chanting and drums, mm-hmm. but with like a sci-fi synthy sort of element to it. So it's that clash of like the natural versus the supernatural going on in the movie. And I don't know, especially like the opening of this movie always gets me so pumped, where it's quite like you get the background of like what happened and how Neo Tokyo was created, and then you see the bar and they go in and there's the thing and Kaneda comes out and they get on their bikes and it's quiet for like the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then those drums kick in and it does so much to set the tone of the movie and everything. It's very like ominous and foreboding.
The music is definitely, this movie, it has its own personality.
Oh yeah.
And so it is something that you notice. And I just, some people are like, oh, if you notice something in a movie, that means they didn't do a good job. I disagree. I'm like, if you notice something, I think that
it sets the movie apart. That's something I very much, because you've said the same thing about cinematography in the past, and that's kind of where I'm like, well, if you're not going to try and be different, then what's the point? You know, like if you're, my philosophy has always been how you tell a story is more important than the story you're telling, because you could tell someone about you know, even not outside of film, if you're telling a friend a story about you getting a bagel in the morning, it could be the most interesting thing ever, or your friend could be thinking the whole time, stop talking to me, I don't care about your bagel. It just depends.
That was basically the entire premise of his book, to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Yeah.
Dude's walking home, and he decides to tell the story about all this stuff that he saw, because that's more interesting than be like, yeah, I walked home.
Exactly. So I think it applies to filmmaking as well. Like, and that's where I feel like real skill and talent and creativity come in, is if you can take something mundane and make it interesting, then you're a good storyteller. And yeah, so that's my philosophy. But the music in this, I can't believe I almost forgot to mention that.
The music is very different. To me, it was not what I was expecting, so it was jarring at first, but it kind of goes with what's going on. But like you said, it does stand out.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm glad you didn't hate this.
I didn't hate it. I probably won't watch it again.
That's
but
fine.
I didn't hate it.
Well, hopefully your dad enjoys it.
One more thing. The scientist guy.
Oh,
he kept looking at this. I guess it was like a
brain wave or something like that.
And it's like he was looking at it. He was like, oh, "Look, this is." I'm like, "This looks like it did 10 minutes ago. What are you talking about?" So, I mean, to me, that was kind of hard to follow, but I'm not also not the characters in the world. I mean, like, I feel like if I watched it a few more times, I'd be like, I'd see the differences more.
Yeah, it's all I could really tell was that the waves were getting bigger.
Again, I guess. And again, it was kind of like that whole Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind thing. The person I thought was okay the whole movie turned out to be a scumbag at the end. I'm like, great.
What, Tetsuo?
No, not Tetsuo. No, I'm talking about the scientist. Guy? And then he's like, oh yeah, I actually knew that this was going to go bad, but I wanted to research it.
I wanted to see what it would look like. Nah, man, never trust, well, I don't know. You should
never trust scientists with the crazy hair.
Exactly. If they look like Dr. Frankenstein, there's probably something wrong.
Anyway, Akira, terrific film.
Glad you didn't hate it.
I mean, I watched the first half of this in the bath, so.
And so, to anyone listening, if you enjoyed Anime Month, please let us know. Maybe we'll do this next year. Pick some other films. I was thinking of maybe like Deep Blue or Ghost in the Shell.
Deep Blue, that chess machine that cheated?
No. And also maybe I got the title wrong. It's about a J-pop stalker person.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
It's not a true story.
I'm already on board though.
Paprika's another one that's that I actually haven't seen. So
and then of course I'm over here like Kiki's Delivery Service.
Oh, that's a great one. That's actually one of my all-time favorite Miyazaki movies. But anyway, let us know if you want to hear our opinion on anime in the future. Thanks for tuning in. We still really appreciate you guys and hope you are staying safe.
And staying away from stupid people.
All right, talk to you guys next time.
We will see you in the next one.
Stay thirsty.
Oh my god. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Ace Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.